That feeling, it's that cold, sharp realization that you've just opened a door, you've found a light, and then some people immediately start trying to smash the glass. It's the anxiety of vulnerability, the sudden, terrifying awareness that something deeply personal, something you've built your entire internal landscape around, is suddenly under siege by noise. It's the feeling of standing on a precipice, having finally found solid ground, only to have someone throw a rock at your feet, demanding you scramble back down into the murky water of doubt. This sentence, this short, brutal declaration. As for those who argue about God after he has been accepted, their arguments will carry no weight with their Lord, and his wrath will fall upon them. Severe punishment awaits them. It doesn't just sound like a theological warning. It sounds like a fundamental statement about the architecture of human commitment. It speaks to the difference between genuine orientation and mere intellectual posturing. It's about the weight of acceptance, the gravity of a commitment that isn't just a fleeting feeling, but a settled direction. Think about it physically. When you finally find a rhythm, a way to breathe that feels truly aligned with your deepest self, it's a profound shift in your internal pressure. It's like finally finding the right frequency on a radio, and suddenly all the static, the endless, nagging doubts, the competing narratives of what should be, just fades into background noise. That acceptance, that internal settling, is the moment you stop fighting the current and start learning to surf it. But then you have the critics. They don't just disagree with your direction, they attack the very foundation of the structure you've built. They argue, they debate, they try to use logic, they try to weaponize the very concepts you've internalized, trying to twist the language until it no longer serves the reality of your lived experience. They are trying to argue from the outside, from a place of fear or misunderstanding, trying to impose their own flawed map onto a territory you've already charted with your own internal compass. This brings us to the mechanics of belief, or what we can call that deep, internal orientation. It's not about having the right vocabulary or the most sophisticated argument. It's about the action that follows the acceptance. It's the difference between someone who thinks they understand the map and someone who is actually walking the terrain according to the map they hold. The source material is saying that once that internal orientation is established, once the heart has turned toward that source of ultimate meaning, the external debate becomes irrelevant. It's like trying to argue with a tide. You can shout as loud as you want, but the tide doesn't care about your volume. It just moves. I keep thinking about this in terms of a knot of yarn. Imagine you are weaving something incredibly intricate, something beautiful and strong, with threads of intention and purpose. The acceptance is when you finally secure the core strand, the central tension point, and you realize the entire pattern is now dependent on that single, strong anchor. The critics. They are trying to pull on the outer, less essential strands, arguing about the color of the yarn or the tension of the weave, trying to destabilize the whole thing by focusing on the periphery instead of the core. Their arguments carry no weight because they are focused on the surface texture, not the structural integrity. And here's where I get stuck, and this is where I feel the real pressure. Because if I take this literally, if I take the threat of wrath as a literal, immediate consequence, then I have to confront the sheer, terrifying power of that judgment. I have to ask myself, is this a threat from an external, arbitrary authority, or is it a description of a natural consequence of misalignment? Because if it's the latter, then the argument isn't about winning a debate. It's about recognizing the fundamental difference between two modes of operation. And here's the hard part. I get stuck on the idea that this is purely a matter of winning an argument. I think, if I can just construct a perfect, irrefutable logical defense against every single skeptical challenge, then I have proven my point, and the argument is settled. But the text suggests that the argument itself loses its power. It's not about proving the skeptic wrong. It's about demonstrating that the skeptic is operating on a different plane of reality entirely. It's like trying to argue with a computer program using human language. The syntax is wrong, the logic is flawed, and the output will never be the same. So, what is the architecture of this? It's about recognizing the difference between doing and saying. It's about the difference between having a theory and embodying a way of life. The argument isn't a tool for persuasion, it's a symptom of a lack of internal alignment. When you are truly oriented, your actions become the evidence, not your rhetoric. Let's zoom in on the word wrath. It's a heavy word. It implies a profound, active displeasure. It's not just mild disapproval, it's a force of nature. When we talk about this, we aren't talking about a petty disagreement over a policy or a philosophical nuance. We are talking about a fundamental rupture in the relationship between the individual and the ultimate reality they are seeking. It's the consequence of trying to force a structure that is inherently designed for a different kind of force. So I try to build a layered analogy here. Think of it like a complex piece of software. The initial acceptance is when you successfully compile the core operating system, the foundational logic that allows the entire system to run coherently. That's the internal orientation. The arguments of the critics are like trying to debug the user interface, arguing about the placement of a button or the color of the window frame. They are trying to fix the symptoms while ignoring the core code. They are trying to force the system to run on a faulty patch. But if the core operating system is sound, the UI arguments become meaningless noise. The wrath isn't a punishment for the UI argument. It's the system's natural reaction to being fed corrupted input. The grammatical structure here is also telling. It's a conditional statement wrapped in a severe consequence. As for those who do X, their arguments will do Y, and Z awaits them. The sequence is deliberate. Establish the condition, state the consequence for the action, and then state the ultimate, inescapable outcome. It's a statement of finality. There is no room for negotiation in the final clause. And I have to look at the structure of the self. The text speaks of the believer, someone whose behavior reflects their convictions. This isn't about a certificate, it's about the ripple effect. A believer doesn't need to shout their conviction. Their quiet, consistent way of moving through the world is the conviction. They don't need to defend their internal state because their external reality is already a reflection of that state. So I close the circle back to that initial feeling. That cold anxiety of vulnerability when you finally find that internal settling. It's not about proving you are right. It's about realizing that the fight itself is the distraction. The argument is the friction. The acceptance is the smooth, flowing current. And that leaves me with this lingering question, this thread that refuses to snap cleanly. If the argument is indeed meaningless once the orientation is set, then what is the purpose of the argument then? If it's not about changing the heart, what is the function of the argument at all? Is the argument not a necessary, albeit flawed, mechanism for testing the boundaries of that orientation? If the argument is just noise, is it still noise? Or is it a necessary, albeit irritating, vibration that helps us calibrate the sensitivity of our own internal compass?